Israel has begun what it calls limited tactical pauses in military operations to allow the UN and aid agencies to deliver aid in Gaza. Dozens of food trucks entered the enclave through an Israeli checkpoint on Sunday. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there is no starvation in the Strip, but the World Health Organization has warned malnutrition has reached alarming levels, with nearly 1 in 5 children under the age of 5 now acutely malnourished.
Zainab was once a fairly healthy baby. But when the 5-month-old died, she weighed less than when she was born. Doctors say her cause of death was severe starvation. My 5-month-old daughter died of malnutrition, the closure of the crossing and the ban on the entry of baby formula. With my daughter's death, many will follow. Their names are on a list that no one looks at. They're just names and numbers. Our children, whom we carried for 9 months and then gave birth to, have become just numbers. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, Zainab is one of the dozens of children to die of malnutrition-related causes in Gaza in the past 3 weeks. The World Food Programme says these trucks finally entering the Gaza Strip on Sunday are a welcome step. Amid the growing international outrage over the hunger crisis, Israel has agreed to provide secure land routes for UN aid convoys. Military operations in parts of the enclave were also put on hold to allow more aid.
This is long overdue, and we need still to reiterate how important is the ceasefire. So now we see this as a proper way for us to increase the assistance into Gaza, but it will not be within, one single day that we can actually change the current level of starvation that you have currently in Gaza.
Israel has blamed the United Nations and its partners for the hunger crisis and has accused Hamas of stealing aid.
Israel is presented as though we are applying a campaign of starvation in Gaza. What a bold-faced lie. There is no policy of starvation in Gaza, and there is no starvation in Gaza. We enable humanitarian aid throughout the duration of the war to enter Gaza, otherwise there would be no Gazans.
The Israeli government restricted nearly all aid to Gaza from March to May this year to pressure Hamas into accepting a ceasefire. In late May, the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began distributing food at limited sites. According to the UN, hundreds of Palestinians have been killed near the aid distribution sites since then.
And let's go now to our correspondent in Jerusalem, Tania Krämer. It's good to see you, Tania. You briefly visited the Karim Shalom border crossing in southern Gaza with the Israeli military yesterday. What did you see there?
Yeah, what happened is the Israeli military took some reporters. As you know, foreign journalists can't really go independently into Gaza. They took us to the Kerem Shalom crossing. Now you have 2 sides of the crossing. One is the Israeli side, where all the humanitarian aid and supplies are being checked and cleared, and then they move to the Gaza side, where they are supposed to be picked up then by the aid organizations and the United Nations, by the trucks there. Now they brought us there to an area where they claim the aid has not been picked up for weeks. There were pallets, of all kind of aid and food supplies sitting there, basically underlining their narrative. They told us it's Hamas who's responsible for the situation in Gaza. They have been diverting and stealing aid. They have been monitoring what's going on in Gaza, and Israel says there is no famine or starvation. And they also have consistently blamed the United Nations Nations of not doing its job, of not picking up those trucks and distributing them in Gaza. Now, we've been hearing also repeatedly from the United Nations that it's very, very difficult to do so because they need the authorizations, they need the coordination with the military to move those trucks to pick up from that area, which is also in a militarized zone, and then bring it on roads to their warehouses. Also, some of their warehouses are now in zones that have been under evacuation orders. So these are multiple problems there. And we heard that yesterday from the Crossings Authority, KOGAT, 120 trucks went in. This is still obviously not enough. And we have to talk about, the human suffering in Gaza. We've been seeing these images and we can draw our own conclusions from it. And we are hearing from from humanitarian workers say, while they're welcoming these change and these new measures, this has been going on for so long, and people who suffer from acute malnutrition didn't get the nutritious food that they needed. For them, it's too little too late.
And Tania, these measures you're referring to, Israel opening land routes and pausing fighting in parts of Gaza to allow more aid to flow into the territory, is this temporary?
Well, we don't know yet. I mean, the announcement came on Sunday. So they announced that there will be humanitarian corridors that would allow then those convoys of trucks carrying aid, moving in a secure manner through to their destinations. And this is very important because there has also been looting or desperate people waiting for those trucks passing certain areas and then just trying to get their hands of anything that is on the trucks. And that's also a problem for the United Nations if they have not the security to bring those trucks to the destination, and people have been killed as well on the way. And we have not even talked about those controversial distribution centers that Israel has shifted its aid distribution to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So that is one thing. And then, of course, we have those pauses that have been implemented right now between 10 local time in the morning and 8 in the evening. There will be no fire in certain areas, that is Gaza City, Al-Mawasi and Al-Balagh. But we don't know for how long this will last, and also whether this will actually increase aid and supplies coming into Gaza.
All right, that's DW correspondent Tania Krämer in Jerusalem for us. Thank you, Tania. For more, I'm joined by Jamil Sawalmeh, who is Country Director for ActionAid Palestine and is based in the Jordanian capital, Amman. Welcome to DW. Israel says it will open some land routes and that it will pause fighting in parts of Gaza to allow for aid to be delivered. What are you hearing from your colleagues on the ground in Gaza?
Yes, good morning, Christine, and thanks for having me. Well, unfortunately, these temporary tactical pause is not what we need now. And so far, we haven't seen any significant improvement in terms of access of aid into Gaza. As per the latest report yesterday, only 73 trucks were allowed into Gaza compared to the 600 trucks that we needed even before the current war in Gaza. So what we are hearing on the ground from our colleagues and our partners who are operating and implementing humanitarian programs in Gaza, unfortunately, this does not change the reality because it's very severe. The conditions are horrific. And we are seeing that children particularly are actually most impacted by the current engineered starvation in Gaza. So the announcement coming from the Israeli army, we believe that it's only a way to mitigate international pressure. And it's not going to be sufficient or adequate for any scale of needs in Gaza, since the quantities that have been entered so far are very little. And the airdrops that have been also conducted in Gaza recently are actually inefficient. When we also consider the danger factors that from previous experiences, we've seen that these airdrops have actually killed people inside Gaza. In addition, of course, to the most recent ones have landed in dangerous combat zones. So we're putting civilian populations into more and more danger.
Yeah, Jamil, I had a separate question for you about those airdrops, but just for the moment, you alluded to the pressure Israel is now under from its allies around the world. But we do have now some land routes having been secured by Israel. You said some trucks did go in, although not nearly the levels that you would like to see. But do you see this as a turning point or more of just a temporary reprieve?
Well, it's unfortunately so far we know that these are temporary tactics being implemented by the Israeli army based on the previous historical experience in the 22 months of this war. However, we consider this an opportunity also and a call for the international community to continue increasing the pressure using all means to make Israel abide by its international obligations under international law, and call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. That's the only environment that will allow us and the international communities to be able to transport and deliver aid to the scale that is needed. And everything we are going to deliver in the next period is going to actually deal with the most current impact of the situation. But we know that there are long-term impact of this as well, because of the starvation that has been happening for so long, that will have a long-term impact on particularly children and women in Gaza that will need a continuous and sustainable flow of aid. And we talk about all types of aid, including fuel, food, as well as medical supplies that are much needed in Gaza. Therefore, the current tactics that are being implemented, we see them as temporary tactics. And unless we see a significant improvement in access into Gaza from all crossings, including the humanitarian corridors from Egypt and Jordan, then I don't think much will improve for the civilian population in Gaza.
You were making the point about the airdrops earlier. My question to you was going to be how effective that effort's been, Israel and other countries dropping aid via the air.
Well, the first question that we ask always, why do we need these airdrops? When we have land crossings, then we have tons and tons of aid piled up at the crossings there. There are actually half an hour track transportation into Gaza. So why do we need these inefficient, dangerous, and very expensive airdrops? And as I said previously, unfortunately, previously when these airdrops were conducted, some civilian populations were killed directly by the pellets falling from the skies on their head. In addition, of course, to the current situation, some of these airdrops have landed into dangerous combat zones, which means that civilian populations cannot access it. And if they try to access it, they will be subject to direct fire from the Israeli army. So definitely these are not efficient, and they also constitute some danger to the civilian population.
All right, that is Jamil Sawalmeh, Country Director for ActionAid Palestine. Thanks so much, Jamil. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.